Greetings, I'm Daniel Hubin with Logos Education, and I'm excited that today I'll be sharing about my favorite line of ordinary, regular use notebooks, the Maruman Mnemosyne. Now, Maruman is the name of the company that produces these notebooks in Japan. And Mnemosyne is the name of this particular line of notebook that they produce. Now, Maruman, as I said, is a Japanese company. They were established in Tokyo in 1920, and originally they produced sketchbooks. And over the decades that followed, they released other paper products, and their focus has really been on creating tools for creativity. Now, this particular line, the Mnemosyne, is a much more recent product for them. It was only released in 2004 and later, and they designed this line of notebook for businessmen. It is very classy design. They're wire-bound notebooks, but they all have this consistent black, hard plastic cover with very minimal gold lettering on the cover that includes the number for the size of the notebook and then the Mnemosyne name. Mnemosyne is the Greek name for their goddess of memory. So in ancient Greek mythology, Mnemosyne was the name of the goddess of memory. And Maruman took that name as the name for this line of paper products. And the catchphrase that they developed for this Mnemosyne line is "writing and thinking are creative," which I find an interesting motto for a line of notebooks, and tells you a bit about the approach of this company. When they produce their notebooks, they use European standards for page sizes. So the page sizes may seem a little odd to Americans. I have two sizes for this notebook. They come in multiple sizes and multiple interior designs, including lined, dot grid, grid, and I believe they have some blank notebook options, but I'm not completely certain about that for this particular line. This notebook is their B5 size, and for Americans, that would be pages that are 9.8 inches tall and 6.9 inches wide. This smaller pocket-sized notebook is their B7 size, which is 5 inches wide and 2.9 inches tall. I got into this notebook, discovered this notebook line while I was trying to discover a good fountain pen friendly notebook that I could use for taking notes in grad classes. I take all of my notes using fountain pens, and I didn't want to buy the standard notebooks that you can get for $1 from Walmart or Dollar Tree that bleed like crazy with fountain pen inks. And I didn't want to shell out a huge amount of cash for notebooks for taking notes. And this line had come highly recommended. It's a very inexpensive line as far as high quality fountain pen friendly notebooks go. And so I purchased it from Amazon. I was very pleased. And more recently, I've restocked on these notebooks, and I found that the notebooks are even cheaper from the Pen Boutique website. And so I restocked from there. This notebook is in stock from the Pen Boutique. I'll include a link for this. And it's available for $2.80. Great price for a tiny notebook. This larger notebook is currently out of stock, likely due to the holidays, and also due to the start of a new semester for both grammar, high school, as well as university students. And once this is back in stock, the price at present is $7.60, which is still a good price for high quality paper. You'll notice that both of these are wire bound. They both have very nice, heavy duty, flexible but durable plastic covers. This is dot grid, which I find really helpful for taking notes in class. The layout is also really nice. There's a section for a date and a section for a title on each page, and this is helpful if you're taking notes during a meeting or jotting down notes for your own personal use, or in my case, often taking notes in class. So I can put the date of a course lecture and then the title of a particular lecture. And I find the dot grid really helpful for taking notes because I use a outline method for taking notes, and so I can keep track of indenting lines using the dot grid. The smaller B7 notebook does not seem to be available in a dot grid, so I have the line version. Both of these are 5mm ruled, so the lines are 5mm apart, so are the dots on the dot grid. The small notebook does not have a header, which makes better use of the size, although I kind of wish that they had some kind of header for the smaller notebook. They do divide their pages into 3 sections with these lines that are slightly darker. I rarely ever use the 3 sections, but the lines are not so dark that they're annoying. So you can use the 3-sectioned layout or ignore it, either way. Now, what really drew me to this paper is how it handles ink. It is a very smooth paper, not as smooth as some brands such as Tomoe River, but still fairly smooth, moderately ink resistant. I've heard that it's fairly similar to the Clairefontaine paper, which is produced in France, and that's often the paper used for rodeo notebooks. This is 80-gram paper, so it's a nice paper, high quality, not as heavy as many fountain pen friendly papers, and it's pretty thin for the paper weight, which is nice. I've done some samples of inks. You can see the top and bottom inks are sheening inks, and you can see a bit of that sheen on this paper, which is very nice. It does show off sheening inks where you have that dual tone, a base color, and then on ink-resistant paper such as the Maruman Mnemosyne, you get that second color in certain lights. Now I do find that if a portion of a page gets excessive use, perhaps it's oil from my hands. If I'm resting my hand on a lower portion of the page, sometimes when I write on that portion of the page, I don't get as much of the sheening, if any. So that is one downside to this paper. There does seem to be some limits to that sheening when a paper has some use. I think it has to do with oil on the paper from human touch that gets in the way of the sheening, although I'm not completely certain of that. I have noticed that occasionally with some inks I'll get some very, very slight feathering. That seems to be the worst with the Pilot, and I'm probably getting butcher the name, but Iroshizuku inks. And I've heard that others have had the same issue with this particular paper. I've also had some light feathering from Lamy standard inks, but in both cases the feathering has been fairly minor, so I wouldn't avoid getting these notebooks because of that. These notebooks do have some ghosting, which isn't a big deal to me. You can see with all of the ink samples, there's some ghosting. Some people are really annoyed by it, and it's not a big deal to me. You don't really get much bleed through with this paper. You do see a bit of bleed through here. It's very minor. That is the Pilot Iroshizuku ink sample. And so you can see that the ink, that particular ink doesn't seem to play as nicely with this paper than some inks. But still, the bleed through is very minimal. I still use this ink with this paper, and I don't find it too awfully annoying. This paper is thin, and so because of that, I'm not surprised that there's ghosting, and I'm very pleased that the bleed through is very minimal, if at all. And so, is this perfect paper? No, but it's a nice middle ground. It doesn't give you the high quality display of ink qualities that you get with maybe a Tomoe River paper, but the dry time is very reasonable. The ink dries quickly enough that you can fairly reasonably take very quick notes on this paper, and you don't need to worry too much about smearing. I've still smeared ink a number of times, but you don't have significant issues with ink staying wet for past maybe 15 or 20 seconds. So overall, it's a really great paper for just general use. You don't have the issues that you have with most papers, and you also don't get some of the pros, but also some of the cons that you get with highly ink resistant papers. So I would highly recommend that you look into these notebooks and consider them for your own collection and personal use. Thanks so much for watching. Have a blessed day.